The boy who was blessed can have everything he desires. What's up, you guys? Hunter, and here we are to do a breakdown and discussion on the boundless potential of Yuta Okkotsu's copy technique, and breaking down every single hypothetical technique that Yuta Okkotsu could have access to by the time of the current manga, based on information that we have, and hypothetically techniques he could have if we were to, jack him up completely, literally just hand him the wiki. There's no other way I can really put it other than flat out handing the young man the wiki. But honestly, we got a lot, and I mean a lot, to talk about, so let's not waste any more time and let's hop right into it. What's up, guys? Hunter here. Fun fact, I have it on me, and I keep it on me at all times, every time, anytime. But unfortunately, this isn't Yuta Okkotsu's preferred weapon. He's much more of a katana man, if you will. So Yuta's got it on him, and he keeps it on him at all times until someone kicks it in half. He probably has backups in Rika, though. But Yuta Okkotsu. Now, obviously, I've been somewhat of a, as I've been called, a Yuta down player, a Yuta hater, a Yuta, let's say anti-Yuta yapper. I don't know. A dark Yuta yapper, if you will. But I do love the character. I only give him so much attention because I still appreciate the character a whole lot. I just think sometimes he's overhyped. But one way, one place, one potential place where I would never, and I mean never, lowball, downplay whatever the character is his technique. Admittedly, I will still forever clown the man for having only 5 minutes with his technique, but regardless, I gotta give him his due credit. Copy and basically any series, any kind of technique that allows you to take other techniques is the one technique where you essentially can kind of just make an inverse composite character. Think about it. Obviously, there are series like Naruto, which don't take it to the full potential. Mr. 1000 Jutsu, I'm looking at you, Kakashi. But there are a bunch of series, whether it be Dragon Ball with characters like Cell or Majin Buu, or series like... That's a spoiler. That's a spoiler, so I won't say it. But there's another series like God of High School that has a character that has a very similar ability to that. The copy technique allows for free range, essentially just slamming every single technique the verse has to offer into one singular character, allowing for combinations, utilizations, and ability usage that can never be seen anywhere else. That's what Yuta Okkotsu naturally affords the world of Jujutsu Kaisen. However, we do have some stipulations. If we think that Yuta Okkotsu needs to consume a piece of somebody, whatever that piece may be, whether it be a drop of the life juice, whether it be a strand of hair, whether it be the air they breathe, his options get a lot, and I mean a lot more limited. Especially even options that a lot of people believe he's recently acquired, they kind of fall off a cliff. He still has a good amount of techniques and abilities that he could easily get access to, especially over the month time skip, but the breadth of abilities that he has, if he needs to consume a piece of somebody, or Rika needs to consume a piece of somebody, kind of limits his potential a whole lot. Is it too limited? No, not really. In fact, some of the best techniques he could have access to, I'm thinking of one in particular, would be just fine for him to have access to if you go with Ryu's assumption. But I'm going to say this, it's Ryu's assumption. He doesn't know. Ryu took a wild guess, and the fandom ran wild with it, and I don't blame it, because it's the only clarification we've had on copy technique, on the copy technique, mimicry, whatever you'd like to call it. But considering Kenjaku doesn't mention this, Kenjaku, the most knowledgeable character in the series, just mentions that, oh yeah, Yuta can unconditionally copy curse techniques. I'm going to assume Yuta simply needs to see the technique, understand how it works, and add it to the Rika database. This would explain why he has cursed speech by the time of JJK 0. I don't think, unless you think he just took a strand of hair off of Inumaki and fed it to unmanifested Rika way back when, I don't think he ate any part of Inumaki, so him having cursed speech back then wouldn't make sense if it required... So I think he can do it unconditionally as long as he understands the technique. That explains how he got cursed speech. That explains how sky manipulation is something he somewhat understood. He got the full explanation on it and was able to use it. And we don't see Rika eat Druv, but he has Druv Shikigami technique. So ultimately, I'm going to go with that interpretation. The interpretation that isn't completely unlimited, like Yuta literally having every technique in the entire series. I'm not going to assume someone just handed him the wiki. But what I will assume is that anything that Yuta has seen and can either get an explanation from people who have fought the user of that curse technique, and or he has direct footage of it and is able to study it and get it down. I'm going to assume Yuta has access to all of those techniques. So while I'm not going to hand you to the wiki, what I will use is the wiki to scroll through every single technique that he could hypothetically have access to with the conditions of his curse technique. Now, with that being the case, the first one on the wiki is Nobunaga Kugisaki's straw doll technique. Now, admittedly, this one's a little bit weird, but he should have access to it. The main reason I say this is because, one, we know a lot of the events of Shibuya were recorded by Mekamaru. Yuta himself very specifically references Mekamaru footage, so everything from Shibuya that had any sort of Mekamaru sightings remotely close to it should be there. And on top of that, there are multiple people who knew what Kugisaki's technique was, including a little someone named Yuji Itadori, who could explain the technique the best he could to Yuta Okkotsu, plus whatever footage is left over from Shibuya thanks to Mekamaru and any other camera footage that was at the time, meaning he should have access to resonance, or the straw doll technique. Now, you may be wondering, what would he use this for? I'm assuming, I'm going to take a guess, that after his extensive battle with Gojo Satoru, Sukuna's juice is probably everywhere. Like, legitimately everywhere. Like, I presume that Yuta could just run around the battlefield and take a gamble. Unlike before, where you could argue that if someone were to, like, grab a splatter and use resonance on it, say you believe Nobara's still alive, and just bang with the hammer, they may have a chance of hitting Gojo. Gojo's not alive anymore. So it's perfect. Yuta can just use resonance on any random drop of blood that he finds, and hopefully it ends up harming Sukuna. Of course, he would need the little straw doll medium, or he would need to ingest the life juice and then hit himself. But with his RCT, with resonance ability to affect the soul, with resonance's ease of access, just a life juice and once again just a little straw doll, anything that remotely looks human, straw doll technique could actually go kind of crazy, though admittedly it's on the lower end of broken techniques that Yuta Okkotsu could have access to. But going from a lower end technique that Yuta could have access to an extremely high end technique that Yuta could have access to, what has he been watching? What exactly has that man been watching this entire time? Which battle? Who has he been watching battle? Who's been taking consistent dubs from Gojo to Kashimo to maybe even Itadori and Higuruma themselves? Oh yeah, Ryomen Sukuna. And once again, since we're going under the assumption that Yuta simply needs to understand the technique, visualize it, and be able to replicate it, like he did with Uro, just saw her, had her explain it, took a wild guess, and since Sukuna's technique is confirmed to be not that complicated, it's just a slash, could be entirely possible that our little Mr. Prodigy, after witnessing Sukuna consistently use it, whether it be just the regular dismantles, whether throwing out the cleave, throwing out the spatial slash, with all those utilizations of cleave, plus any hypothetical footage that's left over from Shibuya that he could have been studying over the month, he could have access to cleave and dismantle. Now, this alone would be a massive buff for Yuta. One of the biggest things that you'll consistently hear me like whine about for Yuta is that AP-wise, he's kind of weird. He's not like weak or anything. Once again, bro has it on him and keeps it on him at all times. And hey, a sword is better than your fisticuffs at any time. But realistically, like, it's not the best AP or kind of attacking kit. Thin Icebreaker is great. Thin Icebreaker is spatial manipulation Duraneg. Fantastic. But in terms of long-range attack potency stuff, Yuta doesn't really have it. Curse Speech has the risk of rebounding if he tries to use it on Sukuna in particular, the only character in the series with more curse energy than Yuta, except for maybe like Kenjaku, but that's a debate for another time. But something like Cleave and Dismantle, not only is it close range utility that allows for you to just randomly send out a slash, imagine him swinging his blade and slashing at air, and then Sukuna gets slashed on top of that from Cleave or Dismantle being fired from him. But on top of that, you get that long range utility. Yuta doesn't have to get close. Yuta's one of the bulkiest characters in the series. He's arguably number 3 or 4. I'd say Gojo's bulkier because of, you know, consistent RCT, and obviously Sukuna's bulkier. But then it depends on who you think is bulkier between Kenjaku and Yuta. But giving Yuta the full benefit of the doubt, he's the 3rd bulkiest character in the series, so he's okay to take some hits, but it'd be very, very helpful against Ryu and against Uro if he could just send out a flying slash or two. And considering he's been watching the entire battle, he has the footage from not just Shibuya, but the footage he's been watching this entire time, and the fact that Sukuna's technique isn't all too complicated, at least the Cleave and Dismantle of it all, I could see it happening. I could see it popping off. Space Slash was a little bit up in the air, admittedly, but considering Sukuna, another prodigy, was able to simply witness Mahoraga do it once, not experiment with it at all, and while missing a hand, missing some toes, missing his big toe, like everything was off for Sukuna and he was still able to perform first try, I wouldn't be shocked if Yuta, the blessed prodigy who pulled off sky manipulation once again on the fly for the first time and timed it and manipulated it perfectly, a much more complicated technique in my opinion than Cleave and Dismantle. I wouldn't be shocked if Mr. Okkotsu pulled out with the Spatial Slash. And obviously that's I'd say there's only one other technique in this video that may be more broken than Yuta with Cleave and Dismantle, especially Spatial Slash. But of course, there's still more techniques we have to cover. And another one we have to cover is the Disaster Flames. Now, you may be wondering, hold on a minute, pencil that. Where would he get this from? But once again, I gotta remind you, all of Shibuya was recorded. Am I saying that properly? Is it Shibuya? I keep saying Shibuya, but is it Shibuya? I don't know. I've played Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance. I should know if it's I think it's Shibuya. Shibuya, not Shibuya. I'm sorry. If I'm pronouncing it wrong, I'm pronouncing it wrong. But with that being the case, feel free to correct me down below. But with that being the case, Jogo was using the Disaster Flames in Shibuya on a very large scale. And of course, we have multiple witnesses, whether it be Itadori, who witnessed Jogo's domain, whether it be Panda and Kusakabe, who ended up witnessing the Maximum Meteor, whether it be all the live footage that comes from the destruction that Jogo was causing in Shibuya, all that, he has more than enough on Disaster Flames. Sure, he may not have stuff like the insects, because those are only used in Gojo's fight, and sure, he could have told you about that, but that's oddly specific. But realistically, he could have the Disaster Flames. And since it's not too complicated a technique, once again, I'd say it falls beneath Drew Shikigami technique and sky manipulation. Yuta with massive AoE fire attacks. Imagine how much damage, how much fuel Yuta could put behind Jogo's technique. Don't get me wrong, Jogo is a special grade curse spirit. He has a bunch of curse energy. He was burning gallons upon gallons of the stuff every single time he used this technique. But imagine Yuta kind of fuel behind it. Imagine that kind of extra juice by it could go absolutely insane. Imagine Yuta could literally be anime Jogo, if not worse. So imagine Yuta with the Disaster Flames. It's not too complicated. It's not as good as Sukuna's Cleave or Dismantle, but even still, the battlefield control, the chaos Yuta could cause from it. The only issue is you may be able to argue that Yuta wouldn't be able to resist his own flames because it's not anywhere near his innate technique and he wouldn't be properly built for it. But presumably the ability to create, manipulate fire and lava would come with an innate resistance to manipulation of fire and lava. So Yuta with Disaster Flames could go just a teeny tiny bit crazy. And then another individual of the disasters, the disaster curses that Yuta Okkotsu could have access to is Hanami. Now, Hanami is a very interesting one because while you may be able to argue that, oh, Disaster Flames may be a bit too chaotic, especially if Yuta's fighting with other people, using Disaster Flames is a teeny tiny bit risky because he could light them on fire, and sure, he's probably not going to run the ones with Sukuna. It's probably Jujutsu Kaisen from here on out. So thusly, it wouldn't make sense for him to use Disaster Flames unless it's for like a very close range technique, or you're going to drop a Maximum Meteor or a concentrated Maximum Meteor on Sukuna's head. Like, that could be it. But Hanami, her technique, or its technique, once again, we have no idea about Hanami, but their technique could be used alongside everybody else and act as extra defense, extra offense, and it very specifically has unique utility against someone like Sukuna. Hanami, out of all the disaster curses, except for like maybe Mahito, out of the nature-based disaster curses at least, Hanami has the most unique specialization with disaster plants. We have that one plant that allows Hanami, and by proxy Yuta, who once again has multiple witnesses to Hanami's technique in Yuji, in Gojo before Gojo got, and heck, realistically, Todo, we haven't seen him in years, but he could still be around. They have multiple people, heck, Even Maki can account and attest to Hanami's unique abilities. Imagine the cursed buds being used by Yuta. He sends those, they pierce into Sukuna, and they start draining his cursed energy. And he has to shut it down, lowering his defenses drastically so other people could come in and wombo combo. Imagine Yuta lowering Sukuna's guard using that plant, and then having everybody jump him with long-range attacks. Imagine Yuta manipulating the entire battlefield. Once again, I get Hanami's a special grade cursed spirit. Likely has buku amounts of cursed energy to throw around. But Yuta Okkotsu levels of crazy cursed energy. The forest that Hanami was making in season 1 would look like a joke in comparison to what Yuta could do. Once again, for defense, for offense, for hiding attacks, for promoting attacks, for adding more speed to people, Yuta could literally manipulate the entire battlefield all on his own with disaster plants alone in a much safer way than he could with Disaster Flames. So I think Disaster Flames is perfect for that big old damage and causing a whole bunch of issues for Sukuna, maybe giving him a couple flashbacks to Big Papa Jogo. Hanami's Disaster Flames allows for a better, smoother jumping with sneakier things and sneakier abilities that could catch Sukuna off guard and get him looking a little bit rough after he loses a whole bunch of that cursed energy. It could get a little bit crazy, you know what I'm talking about? And then we go on to the next technique, the ratio technique from Nanami Kento. Now, this one is a little bit weirder to argue, but still, we know Nanami used the ratio technique in Shibuya when Mechamaru was recording everything left, right, up, down. And thusly, him having the ratio technique isn't all too crazy. And plus, once again, you have Yuji, you have Gojo during the month time skip who would explain it. You have all this. The ratio technique allows for a instant built-in weak spot. Once again, imagine this stacked on top of another technique. Instead of Yuta thin icebreakering a random part of Sukuna, he thin icebreakers a critical hit point using the ratio technique. Essentially, this just gives Yuta a boost to every single one of his other attacks. The thing with Nanami, and the reason he suffered so much, is he only had his limited amount of cursed energy and just his basic swings that he could do with his own regular sword. A critical hit works in general, but someone like Dagon's able to eat it because of how much bulk he has, how much cursed energy he has, so the rebound of the racial technique isn't that much. But you put Yuta levels of fuel, Yuta levels of cursed energy, Yuta levels of attack potency, and mixing other attacks on top of the ratio technique, it could go absolutely insane. Once again, this is a simpler technique in comparison to a lot of the other ones we've covered so far. So where you may be able to argue there's some complications with Yuta being able to figure out how Hanami worked their cursed technique, ratio technique is just 10 points, critical hit at one of them, at the 7-3 ratio. So, you know what I mean? He could get a spiritual moment of coming in the clutch by making some critical hits. And who knows, maybe he can make them for other people too, depending on how Yuta uses them. But then, of course, we get to the next big old beefy boy of the techniques that Yuta should have access to based on the recordings from Shibuya and the multiple people who suffered at the hands of this idol transfiguration. Now, idol transfiguration is one that we know Yuta should have seen based on Mechamaru recording everything in Shibuya, including things like the entire battle with Gojo, where Mahito was using idol transfiguration left and right. Now, the thing is, this would exclusively be kind of a solo thing, and idol transfiguration would work well for healing other people in the midst of battle. It's a perfect addition to RCT. It may even allow Yuta to save cursed energy when he uses RCT on other people. Instead of using that, he just reforms the shape of their soul, heals them up that way. And on top of that, while Mahito's soul was weak enough, while Mahito's soul was so fodderized that Sukuna being at all in contact with it caused it to break down, Yuta Okkotsu, when working with a whole bunch of other people, including fully manifested Rika, I could see Sukuna not being able to properly defend his soul in time. And he goes in, Yuta grabs him, and then suddenly, it doesn't have to be much, but suddenly his side explodes, or an arm falls off, or anything like that. The beauty of idol transfiguration is that it has so much utility, offensively and defensively. It is a very close range technique, don't get me wrong. But imagine Yuta using idol transfiguration to bulk himself up more. One of the biggest things that he mentions is that, hey bro, I'll be real, I'm not actually the power type. I'm not that strong. But imagine if he became that strong with the same level of cursed energy that he had before, bolstering him up massively. Imagine he gives himself UG levels of strength through using idle transfiguration to change the fundamental core structure of his body. It could go absolutely crazy. Once again, he may be able to alter like the fundamental nature of his technique by manipulating the shape of his soul and by proxy manipulating the 5-minute time limit, which could allow Yuta to fight for even longer. So Yuta, he could have access to it. He could go crazy with that. Idle transfiguration, it's recorded, it's in the kit, and it could go buku bonkers. Another technique that I am going to have to mention, even though it's not going to go buku bonkers, it's going to have to be the 2 manipulation by Momo Nishimaya. Obviously, Momo's still alive, so that makes it one of the easier techniques you can get access to. But I mean, I don't think, unless he wants to start controlling his sword telepathically, like, I have no idea what he would use this for. I mean, like, maybe for those who do wield weapons, he could add extra force to it telepathically. Like, say Monkey goes in for a swing with Soul Split Katana, and typically due to Sukuna having a speed advantage, he'd be able to dodge, but you combine Monkey's physical swinging speed with Yuta controlling the blade itself to force it down faster, then maybe there's stuff like that. And combine that with, like, Momo's control and Kusakabe's control over their respective weapons, and Almighty Miwa's control over her respective weapon, then maybe you can get something out of tool manipulation. Though out of the grand scheme of things, I say this is the weakest overall technique to add to Yuta's kit, but it's something that, ironically enough, I think out of all we've covered so far, is the easiest to argue has already been added to Yuta's kit. It probably just wouldn't do too much. But the next technique we got to cover is construction, and how it... See, the thing is, though, right? Construction, it's hard to argue that Yuta's seen it. But then, no. He soloed all up. But then again, did Mai use construction? Because Mai could only use one Splagooter a day. Even a year later after Yuta did the battle and soloed all of Kyoto. So I don't think we can really include Mai. Because obviously Yuta didn't see Yorozu. And there's no reason to know how Yorozu did or operated the technique. And you may be able to argue... But then again, Maki didn't even know about Mai's technique. So unless you want to argue Maki called Yuta up in Africa and was like, hey, this is my sister's technique. It's very specifically how it works. See if you can do anything with it. I don't think it's reasonable to assume he has construction. I don't think so. Maybe Maki told him about it. And it doesn't seem too, well, inherently it doesn't seem too complicated. Just use a whole bunch of cursed energy to create something from nothing. But like, unless he's making another Soul Split Katana, or he's making the bug armor, or he's making... I don't know, the Inverted Spear of Heaven all over again. I don't think so. And here's the thing, if he could make the Inverted Spear of Heaven, if he even knows what that is, he would have. Because that would have been easier to free Gojo than going through all the mess. So, realistically, I don't think construction's on the list. But something that is on the list, and something that once again could go crazy, and could be a nice way to reference a man who's been taken out of the narrative for... Has it really been over 100 chapters since we've seen Toto do anything? I think it legitimately has. What, we're in the 240s now? So, it's been a hot minute since we've seen him. Mr. Boogie Woogie himself. So, Boogie Woogie allows for Yuta to have insane battlefield control. Once again, I've been talking a whole bunch about battlefield control, especially with the disaster attack variants. But with this in particular, the ability to switch Sukuna into any oncoming attack, the ability to get people out of the way of any attack. The only individual he wouldn't be able to save is Maki, because Maki doesn't have any cursed energy. But, hey, that's some tough luck, broski. You gotta make some sacrifices. But everybody else, he can control the battlefield. Heck, if he's in a scenario where Sukuna sends a flying slash, as long as it, well, the thing is though, it's hard to argue you to be able to perceive the flying slash. Because no one else can. That's a little bit difficult to argue. But even still, the utility Boogie Woogie provides by a mere clapping, he can switch places with Rika, switch places with other people on his team, switch places with Sukuna, switch places with Sukuna's attacks. There's so many things that Yuta could hypothetically do with Boogie Woogie. Even though it's a fundamental and simple technique, just swap places with someone when you clap your hands. We know that Yuta saw it. He sold all of Kyoto, and I assume that Toto didn't develop this technique within just a year. So he should have access to Boogie Woogie, plus Toto still being alive, so he could tell Yuta how it works. And if you think about the whole eating thing, he should be able to eat Toto, at least a little bit of Toto, because Toto's a little bit too big to eat. But also, He has Yuji right there. Yuji would be able to tell him about it. Then we have the rot technique. I don't think you can argue that that's available, because no one was recording that fight, and Eso and Keshizu perished long before Shibuya. So I highly doubt that is available to him. But puppet manipulation may be available. But the only thing is, though, I don't think it's going to work too well because he doesn't have anything. Like, puppet manipulation he should have, just based on the Kyoto Goodwill event from last year, plus all the information from this year and all the different people who fought Mechamaru, including that waste of space panda. But ultimately, without any puppets, what good is puppet manipulation? Why can I not say manipulation? Puppet manipulation. What good is puppet manipulation if you do not have any puppets to manipulate? So I think puppet manipulation, if it's not even on the table, which it should be, it probably isn't going to do too good. Curse spirit manipulation is another technique that maybe you'll be able to argue he has, but he would need to eat curses. And I don't think Yuta was doing that. Unless it was revealed secretly that he ate a whole bunch of curses. He literally saw Geto fight, don't get me wrong, but considering his technique disappears after 5 minutes, I wouldn't be shocked if he tried it out one day. He tried to use curse spirit manipulation. It was fine. He ran down the 5 minutes, and the curses he absorbed left his body, or he couldn't access them again when he got the next 5 minutes. I could see that case happening, which makes curse spirit manipulation a little bit whack. Tengen's immortality, irrelevant. I'll be real with you. The bag mask, the cloning technique, also somewhat irrelevant. It's not going to be all too useful. The auspicious beast summon is interesting, but I think overall it doesn't provide as much utility as what could hypothetically be allowed. Inverse, I think Yuji would have forgotten about the guy. And unfortunately, Awasaka would have not been recorded by anybody, as far as I know. Unless Mechamaru really was posted everywhere, all over Shibuya. Inverse, while it would be very, very useful against someone like Sukuna, ultimately wouldn't work. The Seance technique also is something. Wait a minute. I was about to write off the same, but no, there's no way he would know it. There's no way he would know it. That's the only issue. Once again, unless you argue Mechamaru was recording everything, unless you argue Kokichi Buddha was literally recording everything in existence, it's impossible to argue he has the Seance technique. That's the issue. I was about to say, he could transfigure himself into Satoru Gojo, or transfigure one of the weaker fighters into Satoru Gojo, let him come back and take over, because he has all the pieces. Gojo's body's still just laying out there. But the likelihood of him actually having seen the technique in action, no. And sure, Ino was there, but the Seance technique very specifically requires chance and stuff like that, and a willing participant and all that. So I don't see it happening without direct footage of how the technique works. So that's unfortunate. I almost got hype for the Seance technique, but let me calm it down. Mei's black bird manipulation, also one that's good for information control, battlefield awareness, if he just has the crows flying around and getting a full 360-degree view of the fight. But the only reason I'm so hesitant about it is because, it's just Bird Strike. Offensively, it's just Bird Strike. The information gathering is good. It's very, very good. But Bird Strike do be Bird Striking, though. So I don't really see anything happening there. Even against Ryoma Sukuna. I know no one survived it. No one was able to stop it, but yeah, I'm not all too sure how that one's going to work out in the long run. But another curse technique that is going to be very, very useful, though admittedly to a lesser degree than the other disaster variants, would be disaster water. So Dagon's technique essentially just allows you to flood the battlefield. The only reason I say this, he probably wouldn't use this all too much, unless it's just a Shikigami, is because flooding the battlefield wouldn't really allow for much control. People would have to start swimming or walking on water, which would kind of just defeat the purpose of it. Obviously, Sukuna is not going to sit there and drown either. So I don't think Disaster Water has too many perks to it. Not as many as the Disaster Plants or the Disaster Flames. And unfortunately for Nanako, her picture technique is completely unknown. And even though it was somewhat recorded in Shibuya, it wasn't enough. But I think Yuta could have access to it or would even remember to look for it. Then for Hoyuta, I mean, you could argue we see his technique in action, but no one explains it. Not even he understands how his technique works. It's a narrator-only thing. So I don't think Yuta getting the Haruta treatment is at all possible. Nita has the ability to stop wounds from getting worse, but Yuta literally would have idle transfiguration in this scenario. And ultimately, he would have a reverse curse technique. Two things I think he'd resort to rather than just keeping the wounds here, especially considering it requires some hand signs. It's not an easy process. So I think ultimately, that'll work out all too well. Ume. See, Urume is interesting. Because, like, has Yuta seen it? Legally speaking, he hasn't. And unless you want to argue that the end of Shibuya was recorded too, the only people who could tell Yuta about the ice formation technique is Maki and Yuji, I think. And even then, that's it. But ice is nice. Ice is nice enough. It allows for some sneaky utility, make the ground a little bit slippery, maybe impale Sukuna, make him think, oh, this is Urume coming to help me out, but it's actually Yuta. It's decent enough, but I don't think it has the same safe battlefield utility as something like Disaster Plans, or the overwhelming, dangerous Yuta-fueled offensive power as something like, well, Disaster Flames, starting whole forest fires out of here. But with that being the case, we have Ogi Zenin, his Blazing Courage technique, also super duper unlikely to have any sort of information on. I highly doubt Maki even knows that it does, and she wouldn't tell him. Same thing with most of the Zenin clan members. That was a massacre that was recorded off screen, and no one, and I mean no one, really engaged with it. Not a soul. So like, well, a soul engaged, but the soul did not emblem disengage. No, Maki went through and destroyed them all before any of their stuff could be recorded. But with that being the case, another character who he should reasonably, I'm just saying, he should reasonably have access to the technique is Love Rendezvous. And considering how much Yuta loves him some love, I wouldn't be shocked if he used this technique very, very well. Now, I'm just gonna read straight from the wiki because I can't properly explain it. Kirara, I keep saying Kirara. I give her 3 Ra's. Kirara Love Rendezvous apportions 5 stars with the Southern Cross motif to target cursed energy. In order to target 1 star to approach another, it must follow a determined order, or target with the same star will attract it. So, here's the thing though. Very nice technique. They would have to told him during the time skip. Or Megami would have to remember it. Like, Sukuna would have to immediately recognize the star from Megami's memories and be like, wait a minute, this is how you deal with it. But since Sukuna may or may not have the 10 shadows anymore, he would really have no way to directly overcome this. He would just not be able to approach Yuta. That doesn't stop Yuta from approaching him as far as I can tell. But Yuta is perfectly safe from Sukuna due to the nature of Kirara's technique. And I could see Kirara being willing enough to give it up. Especially to Yuta Okkotsu under these dire circumstances, I could see Kirara giving it up to the most powerful sorcerer, secondarily to Satoru Gojo. And then we have Hanyu's technique. Not recorded. Yuta does not have it. Same thing with Haba's technique. They're the helicopter and plane people, if you're forgetting who they are. I don't blame you for forgetting who they are. I just read their names. I was like, wait, who are these people? But Hikaruma's technique, Hikaruma's there. He's alive. I don't think Yuta's the best court case judger, at least not in my opinion. I love Yuta, I really do, but I don't think he's the best court case judger. Same thing with Reggie. Unfortunately, the only person who could have told Yuta anything about Reggie is, yeah, that's Megami right now, and he's the only person who has any direct connections to Reggie through their battle, so unfortunately contract recreation is not it. Iori Hanzo, once again, just a bad place, bad time. Sure, it would be cool to see you to throw off his arm and, I don't know, detonate it in front of Kenjaku or something, or against Sukuna, but I don't think it'll happen. He just never got to see it. Same thing with the claw technique. Essentially all of Megami's opponents, they just don't get any recording or any screen time, so thusly their techniques are kind of fall into the void. But of course, then you have the rest of Sendai. Ryu Ishigori's Cursed Energy Discharge is very, very solid for Yuta in particular. If he can just copy that technique, copy the discharge verbatim, even alter himself perfectly for it. Maybe give himself, instead of the sides, he just curls it all on top and makes a little cannon in order to honor Ryu. Having the highest cursed energy output in all of history isn't a bad thing. If I do say so myself, it could go a little bit crazy. Once again, solve Yuta's AP problem could go wild. And once again, he would have every reason to know how it works. He's seen literally pretty much every variation of it. And thusly, him having Granite Blast, Not only possible, but very, very likely. Then you have the G War Staff, which allows Charles to see into the future if he pokes somebody with it. I'm going to assume this is very specifically pen specific. So like, or G Battle Staff specific. So I don't think you would have access to it, despite how nice it would be. But then we have, let me take a sip before I get to this man. Kenji Hakari, the main man himself. Now, admittedly, his technique kind of sucks outside of the domain. He doesn't use the balls indoors at all against Kashimo, so they'd be pretty much worthless, even in Yuta's hands. So, Hakari's technique kind of whack. Yuki Tsukumo, this is a weird one. If you think Yuki told Yuta her technique and showed him how to play, would... I don't know though. I don't think he would have Star Raid. I don't see Yuki explaining it to him in the short interval before he went out into the culling games. So while Star Rage would be a fantastic amp for Yuta, I don't think he should reasonably have it, because there's no footage of Kenjaku versus Choso and Yuki, and that's like the one time in the entire series that Yuki and Choso fight. So like, it's unfortunate. I don't think he has Star Rage. Same thing for Kenjaku's gravity technique, no one was there to witness it. No one lived to tell the tale, and thusly, there's no way the anti-gravity engine or the anti-gravity system is able to be activated. And of course, we have the final major technique I want to cover. In my opinion, next to Cleave and Dismantle, the most broken technique that do exist, if I do say so myself, in terms of what Yuta can... Actually, wait, now. There's still a couple more that I think about. They did not cover everything. So I'm going to cover a few more before I get into this final technique that I think could be very, very useful against Sukuna themselves. And if you know, you know. The 10 Shadows technique may be something that you is able to wield, but the 5-minute interacting with the Slaying of the Shadows may not work out too well. Maybe he'd have to restart from the Vine Dogs all over again. Sure, they have higher output than Megamis, but still, I don't think the Divine Dog is that useful. But let's just say, hypothetically, Yuta Okkotsu, especially with all these extra techniques he's gotten, copies the 10 Shadows and summons Maharaga. I'm just saying. It's a possibility. It's a possibility. He should definitely have the 10 Shadows down pat. He should have witnessed it all bunch through the Shibuya recordings and through Sukuna's usage of it in the battle. I wouldn't be shocked if he had the 10 Shadows and went a little bit crazy. Whether it be through immediately sacking them all to Sukuna and then fueling Maharaga to the max, or vice versa. The 10 Shadows could go kind of crazy in Yuta Okkotsu's hands. For the limitless technique, if you think Yuta has consistent, constant access to Eureka's stream of boundless cursed energy, then you get something nice. You get something buttery, something smooth, if you will. Because then he basically has the 6 eyes, and he can use the limitless technique just fine. If he doesn't have access to the 6 eyes, and you don't think Yuta can copy them, then he can't use the limitless to his full potential. At best, he'd be able to manifest the blue, maybe a little bit of the neutral barrier, but he wouldn't have the same efficiency as Satoru. It would be a lot less useful against Sukuna. The blood manipulation technique, also unfortunately kind of irrelevant. Its fastest technique is speed of sound, and I assume Sukuna could even dodge the scatter shot, the buckshot that Choso did. But this is a technique he could very likely have. It wouldn't be the first time he stole a family technique and made it his own. So I could see him using it, popping it out, and just boom, trying to launch off at Sukuna, or buckshot Sukuna. There are many different things that one can use the life juice for. Then, of course, we have the speedsters, the speedy boys of Jujutsu Kaisen in Naobito and Naoya, and their technique, projection sorcery. Now, admittedly, the only issue is there's like no one. Oh yeah, Maki could tell him. Maki could definitely tell him. And we see Yuta directly interact with Naoya. Whether he uses projection sorcery is different, but he's able to react So I wouldn't be shocked if he got it on him like that, you know, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and suddenly he's speedy, 24 frame speedy. That would be fantastic for him. Solve another one of the major problems I think he has, which is his speed. If he starts stacking, he could go wild. And of course, we have one last technique to cover. The ultimate technique. The technique born in darkness. A technique he should have access to, even if you subscribe to He Needs to Eat Some Theory. He should have Angel's technique. The technique very specifically meant to destroy people like Sukuna, especially now that Sukuna is fully incarnated. So Angel's technique of erasing things from existence, if they're evil spirits, could come in handy with a man who has a plan. So Yuta could have Angel's technique and just wipe Sukuna, just like that. That's the final possibility. That's the final technique I think it's reasonable for him to have. Sure, Yuta could have other techniques, unrevealed techniques that, like, we just never got to see that Yuta acquired off screen from the other 7 sorcerers he slayed before he got through to Ryo and Uro. So, already, this is a pretty loaded kit. Stack that on with Cursed Speech, stack that on with Sky Manipulation, stack that on with True Shikigami technique. It could go crazy. It could go down with everything that Yuta would have access to if we give him every benefit of the doubt and give him his full potential. But that's what I think. Please tell me what you guys think in the comment section down below. I want to thank you so much for watching. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And make sure you hit that little notification plot twist you thought I forgot, didn't you? Leave the ultimate copier in the comment section down below. I want to thank you so much for watching once again. Please remember to leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe. And make sure you hit that little notification bell so you not miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, you do have a Patreon down below. It's for as low as $1 a month. Continuing exclusive videos, early content, and more. You also now become a member of the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. Some of those perks will include the live reaction to the next chapter of Jujutsu Kaisen. Now, I want to thank you guys so much for watching once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is That Guy with a Pencil, writing off. I'd like to give a thank you to our $3 members, Connor Plays, Red Wolf 4765, and Greyhound. I'd like to give another thank you to our $5 patrons, Winter, Victor, Sean, Midnight Gemlord, Kevin, and Demix LND. I'd like to give a scrumptious thank you to our $7 member, Autumn's Morning Lazo. I'd like to give another chunka-dunka thank you to our $10 patrons, Robbie Uchiha, Joaquin, and Idem Okami. I'd like to give another thank you to our $25 member, Alex Ice Rose. I'd like to give a hefty, thank you to our two $25 patrons, Calvin Elder and Igneel.